The sound of the wooden swing swayed as we exited the car. The gentle breeze helped make the humid and sunny afternoon more tolerable, but still, the air remained thick. I could feel the sweat coming from my forehead as I stared at the 2-story brick home before me. This was the right place. I checked my powder blue shirt to make sure no sweat had stained it. I wanted to look professional, as I shot Dux a glance to see him looking over me with a smirk on his face. "Are you ready?" he asked as he turned his head, studying the flower beds that laid in the yard. "I suppose I am, because this heat is killing me." "First time in the bio, eh?" "You should know it, because I had never been further than St. Louis until I got hooked up with you." He started to walk up the pavement and to the porch. I followed, studying the red brick home and the windows. It was a charming house, one where you could tell the owners cared for appearances. The wind carried the swing again as I turned to look at it. It was hard to believe that something so awful could have happened to a child. "Do you think she's lying?" Dux asked. "Why would someone lie about something like demon possession?" "People like attention and want to feel special sometimes, or they don't want to admit that there might be mental illness. I don't think that is the case for this one. It could be another Jack from Reno for all we know. That was a waste of time. Even the Vatican knew he was full of crap, and we should have followed their lead." "That was different," I responded. "Jack was a drunk whose wife left him for a car dealer. He thought that being possessed would bring his wife back to him." "Well, she didn't come back, and it didn't end well for Jack," Dux replied while he stood next to the front door. He was right. The story of Jack from Reno did not end well. I also didn't want a rehash today. "She sounded pretty convinced on the phone, Dux." I walked on the stairs and knocked on the door. The two of us waited while I could hear footsteps coming from inside. After a moment, the door opened, revealing a woman. She was in her early 40s, but attractive with blonde hair, but it was her eyes that caught me. They were a deep, dark blue that appeared soft and showed a sense of warmth. "Are you Henry Page?" she asked curiously. I nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Decker. Has anything else happened since we last spoke?" "Call me Lisa, please. And nothing outside of what I described since we got off the phone. Will you come in?" We stepped inside the house into a foyer that was a cream color. I noticed a picture of the crucifixion on the left wall. The glass appeared to have a small crack in it. There was something else, though. It was frigid inside the home. It was much too cold for summer, even for me and where I was from. "Can I offer anything to drink?" Lisa asked as she walked down past the staircase and through the hall. I looked over to Dux, who shrugged, and we began to follow her. "It amazes me that Southerners will still offer a bit of sweet tea while their child's soul is being flayed," Dux quipped. "No, I'm fine," I replied, trying to ignore Dux's comment. I noticed another chill as I walked past the stairs. I looked up to see a bedroom door closed. It had a deadbolt attached to it, and it was locked tightly. Dux looked upstairs too, and had a puzzled look on his face. He could sense it as well. That would be the location of our demon. "Come, take a seat, Mr. Page," Lisa said, as the two of us walked inside what I assumed to be the living room. The room was nice. It had white chairs and a couch, along with a coffee table sitting in the center. The bright summer afternoon poured the sunlight through the two oversized windows behind the couch. I saw Lisa sitting next to a man. I assumed it was the father of the child. He was a plain-looking fellow, with black hair and olive skin. He looked of a defeated man, his shoulders slouched, and a face that carried exhaustion. He had hazel eyes from what I could tell, but he did not look over to me. He just gazed to the floor below. I took a seat across from them, while Dux stood closely behind me. "When did your daughter start acting strange?" "Her name is Annabelle," the man mumbled. "I apologize, Mr. Decker, but when did Annabelle begin acting strange?" I asked again. "It started a month ago, after she came back from a vacation with a friend's family," Lisa answered. "She seemed quiet at first, and seemed to have lost interest in her usual activities." "What kind of activities did Annabelle do?" "She mostly did soccer, and spent time with a youth group." "A religious youth group?" I asked. Lisa nodded. "Yes, they get together several times a week and study the Bible." "Would you say she's very religious?" I asked, as I looked over to her father. He seemed to be part distraught and annoyed by my questioning. I watched as he clenched his fist and lifted his head with tears in his eyes. I was right. His eyes were hazel. "She is very devout, Mr. Page," he snapped. "That's why it latched onto her," Dux chimed in. "A young girl dedicated to Jesus like a well-marbled steak to a demon." A loud thud echoed through the room. It started to become colder, and a sound thundered from upstairs. The demon knew of our presence now. "Where did she visit?" I asked. "She visited New Orleans," he replied. "I knew she should have never went to such a godless place." "Michael, please, this is not our fault," Lisa responded. I leaned back in my chair and watched as the father began to sob. Dux was quiet, thankfully. The sound of scratching began to come from upstairs. It was frantic and aggressive. The demon was trying to spook us. But this was not the first time I had to deal with a demon, nor would it be my last. "Has anyone seen her since this started happening?" I asked. "We asked our pastor to come pray for her," Lisa replied. "It was then we knew something was wrong." "What happened?" "Annabelle said something that shocked us all." The two parents looked at each other. Lisa looked nervous, as if she was ashamed of what her daughter had said. She was taking it better than her husband, who had started to weep uncontrollably. I smiled gently at her. I did not care what the daughter had said, and I wanted them to know I was not judging them. "What did your daughter say?" "She told them that she screwed his dead wife, and that one day she would screw him too." Dux let out a chuckle as I kept my eyes locked at the parents of Annabelle. I did not even want to acknowledge that he had found humor. I stood up from my chair and looked at the ceiling to hear the scratching from upstairs. "Take me to see your daughter," I said, as Dux smiled. He had become bored with all the talk. We were here for a reason, and that was to free the girl of the demon. "We should consult with our pastor first," Michael said. "You could, or you could save yourself some time while he stands idly by out of his element and tries to form a prayer circle. Your best bet is me, and I can have your daughter back before dinner." Doc smiled. "It's about time you said something. I was getting bored with the sob stories." Lisa nodded and stood up from the couch. The three of us walked back to the staircase. She looked at Annabelle's door nervously as she began to climb the stairs. we slowly crept up outside the room. Lisa's hand shook as she tried to unlock the deadbolt and gently opened the door. It was dark inside, but I could hear a faint giggle. It was wise for her to deadbolt the girl inside, Duck said dryly. They could have woken up with their precious little daughter shoving a kitchen knife into their chests. Sweetie, I've brought someone to see you, and he says he can help you, Lisa called out to a young teenager sitting on the floor. She looked much like her mother, with similar hair and eyes. She wore dark pants and a white shirt that was stained. She smelled of urine and feces. No one could help me, especially not this cocksucker, she replied as she showed us her blood-stained teeth. She had been biting herself and leaving teeth marks in her arms. I noticed a necklace on her with a small crystal on it. Where did she get that necklace, Lisa? I asked. She brought that home from a New Orleans trip. Did she say where she got it from? She said it was just some small shop in the French Quarter. She probably went into one of those New Age stores and the moron inside didn't know they had a tethering crystal, Dux chimed in. Probably sold it to the girl for $10. That would be the source, I said as I looked to Lisa. The little stone on her neck is the invitation, and that's why the demon came to her. A witch sold my baby an evil necklace? Lisa asked with a look of confusion. I doubt they even knew what they had, I replied, as Annabelle smiled again. I looked in front of her and studied her for a minute. Lisa, will you please leave us be? I promise you, this will not take long. She looked concerned. I will pray for you all. Your God doesn't care about your little daughter, Annabelle laughed. I heard the door close. The three of us stood silently for the moment. The room was freezing, and it suddenly felt darker. Annabelle looked over Dux and studied him. She gave him a sinister smile and turned back to me. I know him, she snarled. I suppose you know what is next then, Dux responded. I placed my hand around the young girl's throat. She began to cough as her eyes started to turn black. I always hated this part as a dark substance began to drip from her mouth. She began to convulse and tremble as the demon began to exit her body. I watched as the last of the liquid left her mouth and began to drip onto my wrist. The spirit began to climb up to my upper arm and shoulder as I opened my mouth. It was always a bitter taste, but I had done this enough that I didn't gag anymore. I felt my body ache and my head began to pound. It always felt like I was getting hit by a truck for the first 5 minutes, but this one felt worse. It was more intense than the others I had absorbed. This one is wild, isn't it? Dux grinned. Shut up, Dux. I looked down to notice that Annabelle was looking from the ground at me. She looked scared. I knelt down and smiled at her. I'm not here to hurt you. Your mom asked me to help you, and now I'll be leaving. Where are my parents? I'll get them for you, just hold on a minute, I said as I walked over to the door. Not even gonna let the girl know you saved her from a demon, Henry? Dux asked. Please, Dux, shut up, I snapped. Who are you talking to, mister? Annabelle asked as I turned around to see Dux standing behind her. His eyes a dark charcoal colour and his teeth brown and rotting, smiling at her. I'm good at hiding the fact that I am possessed myself, but today my partner has been a bit more annoying than usual. No one, Annabelle, I said calmly, as I watched Dux walk over to me. He smiled his awful grin again and waited for me to open the door. It was time for us to move on to find the next demon. We had several more to go before the Legion was reunited.